So now that we understand the elements, the components that make up a shape, let's go a little bit more into how we use those in order to shape space. And in order to do that, I'm going to look at sort of a case study that I've created here, being essentially this volumetric cube, this rectangular prism, I suppose. It's essentially a volume that is 10 meters wide by 10 meters deep and 5 meters tall. So it's a very simple type of shape, but it's very common for the for creating levels that are based in our normal human reality, because a lot of times we do create sort of rectangular shapes. It's a lot easier to build sort of rectangular buildings than round buildings. So which is why you see them a lot more than the other type. So imagine our level that we're going to create. We want to define this space, but we don't want to define it with just a solid object like this. We want to define it as a volume of empty space. And so let's go ahead and kind of walk through some steps or some iterations on how we could go about doing that. So let's go ahead and start with the component of points. So as you remember, when I was talking about points and talking about this visualization of sort of a rock in a field, so something essentially kind of like this. We have a number of rocks that sort of fill out the field and articulate this surface of the plane, but they don't really do a great job of filling up this the volume that I want to fill up. So instead of sort of a random assortment here that doesn't really relate back to that volume, I'm going to arrange them in a pattern that's a little bit more of the basis for that volume. So just a little bit of a rearranging, but essentially I've placed rocks at each of the four corners of that volume, so it's along the ground, and a couple of rocks in the middle just to continue to articulate and show that that space. So we have here not much of a sense of height and volume, but a sense of identity within the space. So these rocks are creating a positive space as opposed to the negative space outside them. You feel an identity of being inside of these rocks. So let's go ahead and try to, even staying with points, point components, let's try to get a little bit more sense that of a volume here. So here I've replaced the essentially rocks that really have no direction to them with these broken off columns. So while the columns really don't show much of the height and they don't really show much of the extent of where the columns used to be, they do imply that there is a volume of a space here, that, or at least that there was an intention of a volume of a space that some designer, some architect has created. So at one point that these columns did extend upwards, and that possibly like held a roof up or something like that. Essentially there was a volume here, but it is not here anymore except in our imaginations. So let's see, let's take another step, put a few more columns in. This is articulating sort of the side lines along the edge of this this volume, and these make it even stronger. That there's essentially a recognizable space within. Now, I mean, I could, if I really wanted to show a volume here, much like I did, I think earlier, to sort of visualize a volume, I could essentially put some rocks that are floating up in space up at the upper corners of this, but that's not really a very realistic portrayal in most games. So we're just going to stick with this for now and kind of live with the fact that I guess trying to represent this volume with only points is probably not going to cut it. So let's move along to trying to incorporate some line elements into this. So taking out some of the rocks and going back to rocks at corners, introducing this column shape here. So the column shape, one of the main things that it does is define sort of an upper limit to the volume of the space. So now I have kind of representation of each of the corners of this volume, and now this single column sort of representing a height to it. So it may be a little vague as far as like the overall volume that we're creating here, especially on the left hand side away from the pillar. But as we get closer to the pillar, this space feels like it has a height as well to it. Adding another linear element in here, so just kind of a ruined, I guess, step that's along one corner of this this volume. So this creates a much more of a definite boundary to that that outer line right there, and its relationship with this broken column up here in the foreground pretty clearly, well, at least more clearly than just rocks and just points, is creating sort of a this image of this sort of square shape along the ground, combined with the column, and these broken columns create a sense of volume. So add a little bit more, and so even though these linear shapes right here don't necessarily align with the grid of this this shape, simply having them sort of on the ground like this, all consistently in the plane of the ground plane, creates an articulation of the ground plane that's even stronger than if they were not there. Here we go with linear elements with more columns, and as you can see, especially here, the having two columns and a line creates a pretty strong image of a plane. And I guess you could have a plane here in between the two center columns in the middle, but let's see, right between here, just overall, this is sort of creating, because of the relationship of all of these together, makes it stronger of a case that there was an intended sort of overall volume here. You can say more linear elements sort of building up this structural skeleton of a volume. The connection between the middle pillars strongly sort of suggests this overall like overhead plane that's above us, and adding even more to sort of the volume of the space. With here, we clearly define the outer sort of boundaries, and this is a lot more like the sort of tall Taj Mahal image that I was showing you before, where it clearly sort of defines these, not only these four posts, but also the points along the ground and the points in the air that create sort of this volume of a space. And this is almost as far as I can come with just only linear elements, but as you can see very clearly, the linear elements are able to very strongly create a sense of a volumetric space. So let's now talk about moving on from lines, now move to planes, which are the natural progression of elements.